Well, it's not. It is a bit stupid. I agree, but on the other side, I'm thinking, what if this stupidity comes to pass? Like, what's happened to our country?
Speaking of stupidity, Andrew, do you think Leo is going to be regretting some of his comments?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Political Dregs. I'm Calvin, and with me this week is Joel, Hamish, Amir, and our Irish correspondent, Andrew. How you doing, guys?
Hey, everyone.
Hey,
So we should probably talk about the Irish election at some point, but we've just had a reshuffle. So I feel like it's urgent news. We really need to discuss this first and foremost. A lot of changes all over the place. It's very clear that a certain DC has his hands all over this, especially when it comes to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Does anyone want to jump in on this one?
Well, Sajid Javid is out. He resigned. Like, a massive shock. We've had 3 chancellors in the last year. I mean, no one could have predicted that he would actually stand down. And yeah, it seems like there's a massive fallout between number 11 and number 10. And Cummings wanted all of Sajid Javid's advisors to be merged or kind of demoted or something. And he wanted to take the win.
Who's the third chancellor we had?
Oh,
Hammond and Hammond.
No, this is the third one. Vishy Rinak, or whatever his name is.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Rishi Sunak. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly there've been some alpha moves going on, and that's fine. I would say if there is a time to make these kind of moves, it would be right now with an 80-seat majority. I'd say if anyone's earned the right to do a ballsy reshuffle, it's Boris. He's won the election fair and square by a huge majority. He's got the numbers behind him, so I would say he has the right to do this. I also think it's a shame to see Sajid Javid go. He's quite a nice guy in person. Nothing against him personally. Met him a couple of times, had dealings with him. But I do think politically, I've always found him to be somewhat overrated politically, especially since his decision in 2016 to go for Remain in the referendum, when he'd been a very right-wing conservative throughout his career prior to that. So I felt that was a real... and he'd been very Eurosceptic as well. So I'd always felt that was quite a poor judgment call. Yeah, and it was a very careerist move, and so I sort of my estimation of him dropped quite a lot after that. But he's quite a perfectly nice guy and perfectly ethical and honourable. But yeah, I never really rated him politically.
Yeah, he came out.
I think
he came out to support me in a Swiss cottage, so I appreciate that. But I also like the reason he resigned, in that, they're saying they want cohesion between the teams between number 10 and number 11. Well, that's what they're saying. It's obviously a control move. And he said, look, no honourable minister would allow all of his advisors to be sacked and replaced. And I think, yeah, pretty much spot on there. Good for you for standing down for your, principles. Because he quite clearly could have said, okay, and stuck with the job. It's one of the best jobs in the country.
Yeah, that's what Robert Butland did at Justice, which he essentially allowed Dominic Cummings to sack his spat. And obviously the Sajid Javid surprise resignation is the big story. Other than that, it's a fairly limited reshuffle, actually. None of the other big jobs are changing. A lot of the people who we thought were on the way out.
Whoa. There's another very big job that changed, Hamish.
Mm-hmm.
Julian Smith was obviously sacked as the Northern Ireland secretary, and that came as quite a surprise. We saw a tweet from Leo Varadkar expressing sadness that Julian Smith was shown the door. He's someone that commanded respect on both sides of the community, and he was very successful in getting Stormont back up and running. So it's a bit of a shock, really, that he won the Spectator Minister of the Year as well.
And let's face it, Karen Bradley was an appalling Northern Ireland secretary before.
The worst there ever was.
How do you rate Brandon Lewis?
Well, we haven't. Well, if he.
I mean, he was a shit chairman. We know that for sure.
Yeah, on that. But if he is more of a Julian Smith than a Karen Bradley, then he will be on the right track. But he's very big boots to fill.
Obviously, I mean, the Julian Smith thing has sort of regional implications. I don't think it really, with all due respect, I don't think it is a big job. obviously it's an important job, but it's not one of the people that you see.
Yeah, not today. Was during the Good Friday Agreement negotiations in the 1990s, but obviously today, you know, with Stormont restored and no prospect of direct rule, it is kind of.
I would agree. I wouldn't be so blasé about it. I would say if on the ongoing theme of what we think is a much more likely border poll and potential United Ireland, I would say having a weaker Northern Ireland secretary now, who would potentially go along with whatever proposals might come about from this deal to sell out Northern Ireland essentially, and to potentially agree to the checks in the Irish Sea that lead to an economic United Ireland, etc., etc. If you have a yes man or woman there, then I think that could be significant for the broader theme of the union. And Brandon is a very good conservative.
Do you think that Julian Smith was removed because of the bridge that they're proposing? I don't know.
No, I don't think. I think it was very much as I was about to say. I think the cards were on the table for Julian Smith and some of the other people we've seen let go, including Geoffrey Cox, from about October, and they were not seen as being particularly helpful to the Johnson agenda. So I wasn't so surprised to see them going. What I was surprised by was why do this particular reshuffle now and not, say, straight after the general election? The thinking was that there was going to be a bit of a shake-up in terms of the departmental nature of Whitehall, maybe some new departments and departments being abolished. We haven't seen any of that, except of course the Brexit department. So it does lead me to think this is slightly odd timing for this. The Sajid Javid thing is obviously going to be a bit of an own goal. I think it's slightly overstated. We've got used to prime ministers having only one chancellor during their administration. Since Blair, every prime minister has, but actually before that, chancellors came and went like any other cabinet minister. So my main, obviously, the Northern Ireland aspect is interesting in that sense, but actually it's a slightly odd reshuffle, and actually outside the Javid thing, not particularly exciting for me.
Attorney General is pretty interesting.
I think.
I would say, Hamish, could you comment on the disparity in legal experience between Geoffrey Cox and Suella Braverman?
The role of Attorney General is an interesting one, because it is by necessity.
How many years?
Mostly. Sorry, hang on. I'm trying to answer the question. A mostly public law and constitutional law role, whereas a lot of the barristers in Parliament do not have that background. A lot of them tend to be criminal barristers, but of course, Geoffrey, given him a promotion, was not. He was a commercial Queen's Counsel. Yes, he was a Queen's Counsel, but he did not come to that from that sort of background. Suella Braverman, again, obviously is not a Queen's Counsel, and I think part of the problem now is that it's increasingly difficult to find quite senior barristers in Parliament to take on the role of Attorney General. Look, I'm sure she's a perfectly decent lawyer, and also let's not pretend that the government doesn't have a whole stack of professional lawyers that it consults, and indeed lawyers in private practice like Sir James Eadie, who's who we refer to as the Treasury Devil. He's the government's go-to QC at the bar. So I don't particularly worry about that. It's a bit like saying, what experience does Rishi Sunak have of running a global economy?
Oh, Calvin
I was just going to say Suella is pretty sound, and she was a governor at the school that I'm also a governor at until she had to step down. But
what is really interesting about her appointment is it shows that the government are really serious about reforming judicial review in this country, and also having a really long look at whether the way the Supreme Court has been set up over the past 15 years is going to work, and we may be seeing it looks there's a real statement of intent there, because she I think will not be worried about shaking things up there.
I think if you look at the difference between Cox in terms of how unhelpful he was to May, and if Braverman was in the same position with Johnson in a difficult political tangle. I think Boris is pretty clear that he's going to have a lot more help from his new Attorney General. But let's see. But interesting, obviously. Anyway.
Well, of course, as you know, we've had this discussion offline before, Joel. I'm absolutely certain that any lawyer, especially the Attorney General, would not tailor their legal advice to their client. Partly because it doesn't get you anywhere and it's not helpful in the long run. It might give you a good headline, but it doesn't actually help you in the long run.
What else is what I find interesting is that now the 4 offices of state are held by true Brexiteers. So I wonder if this is something to do with Cummings. You know, maybe he had some doubts about Javid's kind of passion for a true Brexit, potentially. Who knows? And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of yes people in the cabinet. This is what I find as a common occurrence in the Conservative Party. It seems like if you're willing to just get on your knees and say yes, then you're going to rise up the ranks at a rocket speed, basically. So maybe this is the way ahead for the Conservative Party. If you want to get promoted, just say yes.
I don't know about that. I think you might be onto something.
Is that the way?
Because I've been trying to think, why have we had a reshuffle? Like Hamish said, what was the point of it? We were supposed to see departments shaken up and broken down, and the number of ministers was supposed to be shrunk. I don't think the timing was off, because we always thought it was going to be this time of year. But what has been the outcome of it? And I think you might be onto something in that he's replaced people that were more lenient, maybe, or more persuadable, and kept the real loyalists, you know, like Rob and Preeti. And we have seen Cleverly go, and I know Hamish has some points to say on the chairmanship of the party, but Cleverly was a pretty decent party chairman. And I mean, we've sat down and had lunch with Amanda Milling. She seems quite a nice person, but we don't really know much about her, really.
Yeah, James Cleverly, very nice guy. Yeah, so that's a shame.
It is a shame, and apologies to the viewers for a little bit of sort of inside the Beltway stuff here. But frankly, the Conservative Party does have a problem with the institution of its chairman. Its chairman is supposed to run the party and be a voice for the party in the parliamentary grouping, whether that's in government or opposition. Because the chairman is appointed by the leader directly, there is effectively no independence in a position which ought to have some independence. I personally think that the chairman should be someone who stands up to the leader and says, well, this is actually what the party think. This is what's good for the party. This is what the members are concerned about. And we just don't have that voice. Maybe we need to have an elected chairman of the party, an elected chairman of the party who had some sort of independent standing would have been able to tell Theresa May that she was absolutely losing the plot. And similarly, internally in CCHQ, I think we all know that it's a nightmare in there in terms of how they select candidates, in terms of how they deal with the complaints processes and treatment of members and volunteers. It's not a good organisation. It needs some proper leadership. Maybe Amanda Milling is that, but frankly, when was the last time you looked at someone and said, actually, this person was a really great chairman as chairman of the party? Maybe, they can do an election campaign, but actually fostering the party.
I was thinking that maybe she's been selected as chairman because she's up north. I don't know. Maybe that's the narrative. The narratives have shifted, and they're taking the chairmanship away from Essex and pushing up north because they're trying to kind of rewrite the story. And the story seems to be something about the north and redeveloping the north. So,
and because we have such poor opposition, there always needs to be an internal opposition. So Sajid Javid potentially is playing the Heseltine role of a new could potentially form.
No, come on, he was fucked. Let's just be honest about this. He was.
Well, I mean, he's bound now to take some kind of high-profile anti-Boris positions on certain things and be.
Not sure about that.
Well, we'll see, won't we? But
loyal, and considering he lost to Boris in the leadership election, he hasn't really stirred the pot much. So
Jeremy Hunt, no, he's been good, yeah.
Except for he's a very big fan of HS2, which I know that a lot of people on this podcast views about.
We're back to HS2 now, Hamish.
English folks.
Yeah, that's exclusionary to Andrew. There used to be a very good functioning railway in Ireland, of course, all across the island, but sadly not now.
Yeah.
So do we think that Rishi Sunak is going to do a good job? I mean, I think if Sajid stood down, there are obviously reasons behind his opposition towards number 10 and what they're oppressing. Is there something here that we need to kind of uncover? I don't know.
Well, I think that they are now they are committed to delivering what they've said they're going to do. And so I think that's quite exciting in a way, because it's been a while since the government has been in a position to deliver on its agenda. He's got all his ducks in a row. So let's see it happen. There's money to be found, essentially. And I suppose Sunak now will be seen as someone who's sufficiently optimistic to
Come on, he's a yes man, right? He's just going to do what Cummings says.
Money can be found. Then that has to be found, doesn't it? That's the challenge.
And so maybe I'm just wondering: is it because Sajid Javid was against the mansion tax that the Conservatives are going to bring back, or maybe he was against changing the inheritance tax?
I think it's more likely that he was floating those policies that they were required in order to deliver the growth in the north, the infrastructure in the north, etc. That those sorts of policies would be required in order to raise revenue.
So how is that going to affect the Conservatives going forward? If there's a 2 million above mansion tax on properties, that's going to really destroy the Conservative base in the south.
Well, they're not. Well, we'll see if they do it now. I mean, I don't know if they would want to do it politically, but. All bets are off. As I said, he's got the majority, so he's got the right to do it.
And then they've passed HS2, and they're going to borrow money to fund it. I mean, it's going to be between 80 and 100 billion pounds. That's basically socialism in action, borrowing to spend, isn't it?
Well, they would argue that borrowing to spend on capital projects was investment rather than borrowing to spend on day-to-day spending.
Am I the only one who thinks this is strange that now we're just borrowing to just keep the economy going?
No, borrowing to invest in infrastructure is a good return on investment for the country. It should be. George Osborne stopped doing it, and that was a mistake. He was, and so the only real austerity occurred in infrastructure spending, actually, and that was a big mistake for the country. Because
big claim there.
Yeah, happy to put that one out. The real.
Our national debt has hit over £2 trillion. I mean, how far is this going to go? Is there going to be a upper limit of maybe 5 trillion?
Well, the upper limit depends on the interest rate, right?
Mm.
Which we're going to just keep.
Well, no, I'm saying is that look, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I recognise that governments can and sometimes ought to run debt, right? But sometimes it's good to do that because sometimes it's a great source of money, but. It's not about. I'm not like one of these sort of crazy Republican types who thinks there's a particular figure that you get to in terms of global actual debt. It's more about debt as a percentage of GDP and what the interest rate that you're paying on that is about. Look, but ultimately, all borrowing is essentially deferred taxation because it has to come back at some point. But let's not get sort of. Rand Paul about it.
I think I'm coming round on the HS2 issue as well. No, because I've been staunchly against it for years. But like we keep saying, we need to invest in our infrastructure. And if this is the only way that we're going to do that, then I think in the future we might look back and think, actually, maybe it was a good thing. I don't know.
I just think how petty for people to be opposed. I mean, yes, it's over budget, and the serious question should be asked about why it's gone so over budget and why these government projects keep going so over budget. Fine, separate piece of work on that. But honestly, it is such a lack of vision and so.
That's all right.
Andrew, actually, I have a question for you. Bring you into the conversation. So HS2 is going to go up north, and then somewhere up north, Scotland, there's going to be a bridge to Northern Ireland. Now, someone told me yesterday, or was it today, that a lot of World War II munitions were dropped in the sea.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, so German U-boats would have kind of sailed, to want a better term, up around the kind of islands in Scotland and down the Irish Sea. So, like, I mean, there would still be a lot of debris of unexploded mines and stuff like that.
And how deep is kind of the sea? It's quite deep, isn't it? It's like a mile deep or something.
I'm not too sure, but I know it's only 20 miles between the very north of the island and the Mull of Kintyre. So it's like it can be done. But I think your conversation is very interesting, because I think Boris Johnson obviously won the election on the whole promise of Brexit, and he united a coalition of voters north and south. But now that the Brexit is done, will we start to see a schism between the voters in the south, who would be traditional kind of low tax Tories, and all these new Tory voters in the north of England that kind of want all this public investment?
Yes, I think we will, and I think we're going to see. We are seeing a bit of a schism in the party as well, between the more liberal side and the actual conservative side, which is more in line with. Okay, I'll tell you what it means. I'll tell you what it means. People like when we've got ministers that are standing up for this woke culture of putting your pronouns in your profile and getting rid of female toilets and all this kind of thing, and the rest of the country doesn't give a shit about any.
That's not liberal. That's not liberal.
Okay, we can argue all day about the usage of the term liberal, but most people who use most people who use the term liberal are not using it as a classical liberal term. Yes, it is
classical liberalism.
When people use the word liberal, they're talking about progressive, woke culture.
They are wrong.
Then let's not use the word. Then let's.
Let's use the word fucking correctly. You're a teacher. Liberal means you believe in freedom, whether that's economic.
But that's what the argument's about. Their argument that that the trans rights are a freedom issue. So it is a liberal issue, actually.
Well, that's.
Is this not more?
Indeed, this is the problem. But the party on that side of things, on the social side of things, has shifted so far to the left that it's disengaging with the rest of the country, which is very small C conservative and very traditional in its values. The country hasn't shifted. The party has, and London has.
The party has shifted, for sure.
Yeah.
Calvin is not right.
Hamish, I haven't moved my position ever. I've stayed stationary.
That's literally not true. You voted to leave the European Union, and then you wanted to stay.
No, I wanted to stay because
at some point in there, you also wanted to leave without a deal. So the idea that you've never changed your position,
Conservative. There's an article in Conservative Home. Joel and I wrote it, where we supported Theresa May's deal on first passing, and I never changed my position. I started changing my position because the Conservatives started changing their position. Theresa May tried to bully through her deal through Parliament 3 times. She failed 3 times, and the Conservatives swung right. I was there. I was like, shit, these guys are fucked off. What am I going to do now?
No, I mean, I'm sorry. That's just. I mean, it's just nonsense that you not having changed your position. You literally have, because you haven't changed your position. We should stay in the European Union. That is one example of you changing your position.
Because of this ridiculousness of stupid trade via Ireland, the Northern Ireland, through this imaginary bridge down through HS2, which is going to be built in 15 years. Like, what the fuck is that?
There we go.
That's just. I mean, I literally am speechless about.
I am speechless too.
The stupidity of what you just said.